Welcome to day 4. Welcome to day 4 of our 10-day live. I'm excited for day 4. We are talking about something that is a topic that a lot of people have questions about, and that is putting together your policies and procedures. So I just kind of want to start off by saying your policies and procedures are so very important. They really discuss the how, the what, the when, the why, of your agency. Whatever processes that you have in place are in your policies and procedures. Really, I like to say your policies and procedures are the foundation of your agency. So I will go ahead and get started with today's presentation. And we're going to talk about those elements. If you are aware of my channel, this is actually a video that I've done a couple of times now. I want to say the first one is probably the most popular, but I really talk about what it takes to put those policies and procedures together. Today, we're going to talk about not only like how do you put those together, but what goes in them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with today's presentation. So I've kind of already given you an introduction to today's conversation, but well-defined policies ensure that you are compliant, you're consistent, and that your care that you provide for your clients is quality care. Because again, there are going to be some processes that your employees, your caregivers are going to be made aware of. And that's in turn going to make their job working for your agency much better. Okay. And then it also creates a structured work environment that benefits both the caregivers and the staff. So we kind of know why they matter, but just to kind of drive the point, they provide a clear framework for daily operations. So a lot of times we don't think of all of the small things that we do each and every day to carry our daily operation. That's a process. How you pay your caregivers, that's a process. How you market your agency, those are processes. And of course, how we take care of our clients, those are all processes. So you want to make sure that framework is placed into a writing, right? And is placed into a manual so that people can understand the why behind the process. When people are learning, they learn a lot of times by what they hear, but also by what they see. Okay. So it's really important that you have those processes documented. Of course, we want to make sure that we are compliant with state and federal regulations. And this is also a way to protect clients, caregivers in the business. We've talked about sometimes a lot of our caregivers, they come to us with experience, and that carries a lot of benefits. But also, can you imagine someone learning something the wrong way and they continue to do that thing the wrong way? Right? So by you being able to correct what they've learned before with your process and how your agency operates, that only protects the caregiver and your business as well. And then it also promotes consistency in service delivery. Right now, we're talking about the key components of your policies and procedures. So really, what should go into that document? So certainly you want to talk about your company mission and values. And we talked about that a lot yesterday when we talked about the cultures of our agencies and how you as the leader of your agency, you really set that culture in motion. And what's going to help you do that is defining what your mission and values are. Additionally, it's going to contain your hiring and employee expectations. So I always tell people when you do your orientations, yes, this is a perfect time to hit your policies and procedures, but you're not going over everything, right? Because it is the responsibility of that caregiver to make sure that they understand the contents of that policy and procedure. However, you as the owner, you want to touch in whatever those key things are that caregiver must know, because it's all important. But those key things that they must know, you really want to touch on during orientation while you have their full attention. Okay. Client care guidelines, compliance and legal requirements, definitely emergency procedures, what should happen in the case of emergencies, and then, of course, that all important confidentiality and HIPAA compliance. So let's talk about developing those employee policies. So the employee policies more dive into defining roles and responsibilities for your caregivers and staff. It outlines work schedules, attendance. How does a person request time off? Do you have a sick time policy? Those types of things. It establishes a dress code and professional conduct expectations. And then it should include policies on training. How are they going to be evaluated by their performance? And that's actually really important. Again, I feel sometime next week we'll talk about employee management more in depth. But something that I want to say now is there should be a way that you are evaluating their performance, and that evaluation is shared with that employee. There's nothing worse than you deciding that maybe this caregiver is not a good fit for your agency, and that person comes back to you and says, oh, wow, I thought I was doing an amazing job. So obviously that's a disconnect, right? So you just want to make sure whatever you're evaluating, that not only do they know you're evaluating them, but they know how to improve if they're not doing something well, okay, in their roles. Client care policies, this is defining the scope of your non-medical services, right? So what do you all do? What are the boundaries of what you do? Especially since we're non-medical and not skilled, okay? This is a perfect time to set those guidelines for personal care, companionship, and then household assistance. And then really, just a tip, things I've been hearing a lot lately, you really want to define how much or little household assistance you're providing. So, although we're there to assist the client, your caregiver is not a maid, right? They shouldn't be doing, heavy, exorbitant lifting, just things of that nature. Just make sure you're defining what you expect that caregiver to do, and also that client is on the same page in terms of what does your light housekeeping service include. Okay. And then you want to establish procedures for handling complaints and grievances. And that's on both ends. That's on the caregiver side and the client side. Both of them should know how to express if they have some type of complaint or grievance. Okay. That's again a process. Okay. Definitely compliance with regulatory requirements. Now, again, that's going to depend on your state. So you want to understand and comply with those state licensing requirements. You want to ensure your compliance with labor laws and caregiver background checks. That process should be alive in your agency. We've already talked about HIPAA, but anytime there are any incidents, so as an example, even being a mandated reporter, there should be a process in terms of what if there is suspected abuse, right? So how do you document that? All of those things needs to, your caregiver should know their responsibility in that process, right? Because something like suspected abuse or an emergency, if there's an emergency that occurs at our client's home, there's a shared responsibility there, right? There's parts that you own as an agency owner, but there's also parts that caregiver owns too. So that caregiver has to be aware of what does documentation look like? What form should I be using? Right? Where does that form go? What does follow-up on that incident look like for you as the owner? Those are all processes. Okay. We kind of already started talking about this, but safety and emergency protocols. So just really outlining those guidelines, making sure that you're establishing procedures for handling medical emergencies, creating a protocol for caregiver safety in the client's home, and then make sure that you're developing infection control measures, right? Especially for COVID, but other related illnesses. Okay. going back to that last slide with illnesses, something that, especially right now with it raining, it's warm one day, raining the next, making sure that your caregivers know their responsibility in showing up to that client's home if they're not feeling well, if they have a fever. When is it okay to show up with a mask? When is it not? When should that person call off? How soon should they be letting you know that they will not be, attending their shift? So again, those are real important processes. I know that we have recently had a few caregivers that were ill with as it relates to taking care of my mom. And sometimes that caregiver is willing to come in even though they're not feeling well. And so you have to make sure that you define what is acceptable in that way, because we certainly don't want to be bringing illnesses to our clients. Okay. Training and development procedures. So making sure, we've talked about this a lot, orientation is huge. This is the perfect time for you to really start talking about those company policies, offering ongoing caregiver training. And, again, a lot of our states kind of set us up for success when it comes to training, because a lot of what we're turning in and what we're showing the state is the training program that we have put in place. Okay, so a lot of times our states set us up for success with this. We talked about this also, setting up mentorship programs for our new caregivers, and then make sure you're periodically just reviewing those skills. And if needed, do refresher courses. And so a lot of times when we talk about ongoing training, this is where we have our in-services. And, every agency handles this different, but definitely there should be some refreshers in there. Right? What are some standards of care that we might want to go over? Right? So just kind of things of that nature. Documentation record keeping. We got to make sure that we're maintaining accurate records of client care plans, caregiver schedules, notes, anything where we're documenting something on a client, we should be retaining that information. Okay. We want to store employee files, their background checks, any training records, all of those things need to be secure. Okay. We want to ensure proper documentation of incidents, client complaints, and then if you can, implement a digital system for efficient record keeping. You know what? There is an article that actually I read that kind of gives an overview. It's kind of like a ranking file of different digital systems. If you all want a copy of that, because it's a good way for you to kind of research before you purchase. And I would even take it a step further. Before you purchase any type of digital system, you want to make sure that that company is okay with giving you a demo of what their system does. Okay, so that article that I have, I'll try to make sure we include it in the notes, but if not, you could reach out to me directly at simplyfajika@yahoo.com, and I might put that in the chat in a moment. Okay, but it's a good way for you to kind of see what these systems are offering you, who offers what. The users that have purchased that product, they're able to kind of give you what the pros and cons of. So it's really nice to see all of them in that way together to help you make a decision on that. So creating the actual manual, okay? It's like a talk. When it comes to creating the manual, because this is the question I get a lot, the manual is consistent of all of the policies and procedures. Okay, so this is everything put together in a chronological or in some type of clear, accessible manual. So remember a while ago we were talking about, hey, here's some of the employee policies. Here are some of the regulatory policies. Here are some of our client care policies. That may be how you structure them. So anybody who's receiving your policies and procedures, they should be able to open up to some type of table of contents. And so it will show a breakdown of what processes are included in your manual. Okay. You want to make it available in print and digital formats. Okay, so there should be a place where that they can go download it. And then also you can send them a manual copy of it. Okay, so you want to train employees how to use and follow that manual. Typically that will take place in the orientation. And then you want to regularly review and update policies to stay compliant and improve operations. So no matter how hard we try, we can't capture everything. And so sometimes as a result of something that occurs, we have to make sure that we either revise a process that we currently have or create a new one. When you do that, everyone needs to be made aware of this new process, but also your policies and procedures needs to be updated. So a lot of times what I'll do is, the first iteration of it will be version 1. And typically there's about 2 updates a year, right? 1 to 2 updates a year at least. So then you would have version 2, version 3, or maybe it's a version 3, and then you put today's date on it. Just something where you can kind of understand what's the most recent updated policy and procedure that you have. Okay. So not only do we have to create the policies and then share them with our employees, but we've got to enforce them too, because a process is only as good as the person utilizing it. So you want to make sure that you're conducting regular audits to ensure policy adherence. Okay. You want to implement a system for caregivers and staff to provide feedback. Anytime there's some type of violation or a policy wasn't upheld, you got to make sure you address it. Okay, so there has to be some type of structured disciplinary process. If you put a process out there, you train your employees on this process, and you see this process isn't being upheld and you do nothing about it, that's letting people know that you really don't care about policies. That everything you say sounds good, but when it comes to you actually running and operating your agency, you're not really willing to enforce the violations. So, and when stuff like that happens, that spreads like wildfire, and all of your employees will know to push that boundary, because they know, or they think that there may not be consequences by doing so. Okay, so you definitely want to make sure you're addressing any violations and that disciplinary process is alive and well in your organization. And then you want to adjust the policies definitely based on new regulations or business needs. And we kind of just talked about that. Sometimes it isn't until experience or something happens that you realize, oh, you know what? I may need to expand that process, or I may need to change what this process is. Okay. Okay, so that is the end of today's presentation. So now I will say this, outside of just individual coaching or needing help with licensing, people are always reaching out to me for, how to create those policies and procedures. Definitely reach out to me if that's something you need assistance with. But remember, I have created a community to really help with support and resources. Because a lot of you are coming to me wanting to own that process on your own, but maybe you just need a little bit more guidance. And of course, I'm here for that as well. For tomorrow's topic, we are going to be talking about one of my favorite things, and that is creating your business plan. So for those of you who have followed me or watched my channel for a while, you know that if this is a new industry for you, and even if you've worked in this industry as a caregiver, it is so important to put that business plan together, so that you can really be, knowledgeable on what it takes to operate your agency as a business. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, you all have a blessed day. Stay safe wherever you're at. And thank you so much for joining me. Talk soon.